Hello, my name is Gabe, and welcome to Predicted Features. So, unlike its sister show, Requested Features, this is a much more casual show where instead of being critical on games that already exist, I'm kind of just saying what I want to be in games that don't exist. And what game am I predicting the features of tonight? The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. The game's been announced a while ago, and we know it's coming supposedly sometime next year. And so I figured before the game actually comes out, I should put my 2 cents so that if I'm right I can point to it and say, hey look, I said that was going to be in the game. So, what? What do I think should be in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2? There's a lot of angles to approach this from, so let's start with Link's arsenal. The weapons and tools you will have throughout the game, and how that should be conveyed. My first thing I want to say is, as far as the Sheikah Slate goes, everything on it that you had in Breath of the Wild 1, you should have from the get-go in Breath of the Wild 2. I think it's just going to be really annoying for players having to even start the game without those things. This includes the paraglider, and the magnets, the bombs, stasis, fully upgraded preferably, but not necessarily. Just those tools should be there from the outset. I guess I have never really been a fan of when games just take away your tools. I like it when they add new ones that work into the game. With that being said, the question becomes, what new tools should they add? Well, we've already seen some kind of weird, either transition to Sky Island or reverse time, I'm not entirely sure, thing in the trailer. But on top of that, the tools should be stuff that are equivalent to maybe some stuff in other Zelda games, maybe not. Here's something, maybe we should get a hookshot. Especially with what looks to be a lot more focus on higher ground. It might be nice if instead of having to climb through everything, we can occasionally, at least some point in the game, just zap our way up. I'd be okay having to earn the hookshot though. Otherwise, I can't really think of any other tools I'd like to see in the game. Okay, what about weapons? Now, when Breath of the Wild first came out, there was a feature that annoyed a lot of people. Weapon degradation. As you use your weapons, they break. Same with shields, bows, etc., etc. I was giving it some thought. Presuming this game takes away the Master Sword, which I'm assuming it's going to, how should it handle weapon degradation? The answer I can come up with is, just make it less. Don't get rid of it. I think outside of the Master Sword, our weapons, any other weapons you pick up should break. Just not as fast as they do in the main game, or in the original game. That being said, I want that to be a melee weapon feature, not for ranged weapons. I believe the bow and boomerang, if the game decides to give you one, should be like they are in more traditional Zelda games. Just tools in your arsenal. I have not seen many people use a boomerang as a boomerang in Breath of the Wild, myself included. And I think it would be a lot more encouraged to use weapons that are out of the ordinary if you weren't risking losing them. Have the boomerang do less damage but be a constant source of range without requiring arrows. And since you have to gather arrows anyways, I don't think it makes sense for bows to break. Also, if weapon degradation is going to continue to be a thing, give Link some form of unarmed combat. Don't have it do a lot of damage. Heck, maybe even have it do none at all and only be used for pushing enemies out of the way. But give him something he can do to actually have a chance if he has no weapons. And that's all on weapons and equipment. What about the map? Now, I tend to say this for sequels, though it's not always what ends up happening. but I think it goes doubly for Breath of the Wild 2. It cannot use the same map as Breath of the Wild 1. People who played Breath of the Wild 1 are probably looking for a new, dare I say it, world to explore. New things to discover and sights to see. And while it looks like these Sky Islands may offer some of that, if they're not just reskinned shrines, which I really hope they aren't, but I hope that element still kind of exists. I'll get to that more later. Right. Just new sights to see, new things to see, a whole changed world. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And when we get into that purpose, dungeons. I'm not going to say it. I'm not a big fan of how the divine beasts are. The shrines, I think, are okay, and you can put something akin to it in those as long as it's not the only use for the Sky Islands. But having something akin to the shrines is fine. But I think we can't do what the divine beasts did. At least not in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of them. Don't get me wrong. I like the upgrades you get at the end of it, but the divine beasts themselves and how you actually do those dungeons, they're just kind of repetitive, is the best way to say it. You go into the dungeon, get the little points, those little computer point things, get them all, fight the boss, get the ability to leave. I think we should, as a whole, have more varied dungeons with more varied objectives. And to that end, I think Breath of the Wild 2 should take kind of a Metroidvania approach. Ultimately, I think the order you do things should be open to your own choices, but you will have different ways of approaching puzzles and tasks depending on what order you do things in. For example, let's say you get a hookshot equivalent rune in one dungeon. And that can change the way you approach this next dungeon very easily. But there is a way to do the dungeon without it. Maybe it's more of a Mega Man approach then? Yeah, I'll go with that. The Mega Man approach. The reason I think this is, well, my own personal complaint with Breath of the Wild. I never quite felt like I was progressing anywhere, even with the new abilities I was getting. With that being said, here's, I guess, one other feature I think should be cool. Now, I've heard some people talk about playable Zelda as a possibility. I'm going to go one step further. Co-op. Yeah. I think that other Zelda games could never have done this, but I think a Breath of the Wild style game could totally do co-op. Having you and a friend explore different corners of the land, go on different adventures, and maybe even eventually have to come together to do the actual Divine Beast / dungeons, whatever they're going to be. That way you have to make some progress together. Either way, I think it could be a fun experience to have with a friend. And that's basically it. That's all I can think right now would be worth putting into Breath of the Wild 2. I hope this video offered some insight into my mind, if not anything else. Anything you'd like to see in Breath of the Wild 2, let me know in the comments below. Anything I said that you do not want to see in the game, also let me know. But more importantly than any of that, have a good night.